Welcome back. I am thrilled to have Tahmina Watson, immigration specialist, especially as in the assisting of businesses, attracting and obtaining the right personnel for their business needs. Now, Tahmina, we were talking about the different visas and such, and I know that you have expertise, and your book is about startups, the startup company. Could you please educate our audience? What does the startup need to do to be able to attract and then be able to obtain the right personnel for their business?
Such a great question. Thank you so much, Alina. It's interesting. I have been specifically helping startups from the time I started practicing immigration law in the United States. And so much evolution has happened. And it all resulted in writing several books, but two of them are specifically about why we need specific visas for startup founders and startup companies. So I would encourage anybody listening and watching this to go to Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, put my name in and put the startup visa in. And there is a guidebook called Immigration Visas for Startups and Founders. And the reason it says startups and founders is because visas and the strategies will differ depending on if the company is your company or if you are now actually hiring people. Now, America traditionally did not have a visa and still does not have a visa where you can use somebody else's money for your business. Now, that is the modern day world of running startups. You are actually raising funds, whether it's from friends and family for your idea, crowdfunding, venture funding, angel funding, and accelerators. Sometimes people get grants and awards from different types of state, city funds. How do you utilize those funds to get a visa? So we have not got a startup visa yet, but we have all the visas that we mentioned with Alina earlier. But there is also something called the International Entrepreneur Parole. That is a program that is specifically for startups who are using funds from accelerators, angels, and venture funding. And the law says that you have to have raised about 311,000 and some change. And the person that you are raising the money from has a proven record of investing in other similar companies that have also done very well. And the reason is that the government doesn't know you from Adam. They don't know if you're going to be succeeding because most startups don't, but they are hedging their bets on investors who actually know what they're doing, and they're putting their money where their mouths are. And so the International Entrepreneur Parole is a fantastic opportunity for startups. And I know, Alina, in your area, in your neck of the woods in Florida, Miami, Tampa, these are huge startup hubs these days, just like Seattle is. And people should know about that.
Yeah, and that is really interesting because you are, especially in what we call the I-4 corridor, that Tampa to Orlando, the tech that has been going through and up past Orlando. So I could only imagine the amount of startups that are currently coming into the state. Also, the necessity for attracting the credentialed professionals needed to advance that business. Because I know, like my father, when he was actively involved in his business, he had an international company. He had oftentimes had to get the HB1 visas and go through with the assistance of an exceptional trained immigration attorney to be able to attract and retain those workers. And I was hoping that you could explain the PERM labor certification process and why it's essential to obtaining certain employment-based green cards, because especially with today, we know on a very general base, there's a green card, there's citizenship, and then we're now learning about the different visas that allow you to stay and work. But how does that worker turn that into a permanent certification to obtain a green card?
That's such a great question. And so before I get to that, I think one of the things I'd ask your viewers to think about is really the life cycle of somebody who comes to the United States and how that turns into permanent residency and then citizenship. Most often, people will come here as students. Our schools are world-renowned, and then coming as international students. And Alina, if you spoke to your dad, he'll probably say there are some genius students around that he wanted to keep. Those students often do not have a pathway that is easy to stay here, but the H-1B typically becomes that. And this might be a good time to mention that in 2025, I'm launching a new program so that international students can actually get more guidance on how they can start their own company. So if anybody's interested, call our office, email us, and make sure you get on that email list. But what happens is there's non-immigrant visas that are temporary visas, and that allows people immediate opportunities to stay in the US. They are fixed amount of times. Each visa has its own temporary period. But to stay here, the employer has to make sure that they sponsor them for an immigrant visa. So non-immigrant visa means temporary stay. Immigrant visa is to stay here. Now, we have a number of categories of immigrant visas, but the most common pathway is for an employer to sponsor them by showing that they have tested the American labor market and could not find anybody to take that position at their company. And that is called the permanent labor certification. And it's a process that goes through the Department of Labor. The employer has to spend a lot of time and a lot of money going through the process where every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed. And if an I hasn't been dotted, maybe 2 years later, you'll find out your case has been denied. So there are a lot of challenges. It is very, very tricky to file these cases. So nobody should attempt to do these on their own, that's for sure. But essentially, the way that would happen is there's a position open, you're advertising the position. The advertising has to happen in multiple different ways. So you have genuinely tested the market. If people have applied for the job, you have to interview them. If anybody is remotely qualified or minimally qualified, you have to give the position to them if it's an American worker. And so if there is somebody minimally qualified, employers generally would either have to stop the process and restart, or hire that person and continue. And so it's a very drawn out process, and it's the first of several steps. The way I describe it is, all work visas will have three components: employer, employment, employee. This is the employment portion where you're proving the job. We have a job and we couldn't find anybody. And the second element is if you get approved by the Department of Labor, is to say, hey, I'm the employer. I have the funds to pay this position. For this position, here are my tax returns. And if that is approved, then the very last stage is for the employee to file for a green card. But that has its own complexity because the government, the law as it is written from the 1950s and 60s, is divided by countries, and every country has a 7% limit of the entire number of visas we have. And if you're from a country like Mexico, Philippines, China, India, and a couple of other countries in South America, you're waiting a very long time. So it's a complicated situation, but the PERM, the permanent labor certification, is where it all starts.
And wow. I have to give it to you. It's just, my mind is still swirling, like just all of the facets and the people that go into it. It's incredible. And I know we have only a few more minutes with you. And you mentioned this program, and I really want to give you the opportunity because to me, I got very excited about that because it gives that American dream, that ability for these young people to really establish themselves, especially because one of the things that we have heard over the years, at least I have, is that we have a great talent pool that leaves, from our universities. So tell me more about this program, because I really want to promote this, because I think it's so important that the young people know that there is an opportunity for them?
Totally. And Alina, you're right to be excited, because the future is with people who are starting new companies with the various different types of evolutions that are going on in the country and in technology itself. And America is where people want to be. But if America and the laws do not want to keep them, they are going to go wherever they're welcomed, which is most of the world. So we are actually actively losing people. So you're very, very right, Alina, to touch on this important issue, feel excited, and also understand what's at stake. So what I will say to people is, number one, go to our website, www.watsonimmigrationlaw.com. You can sign up to our blog. You can make sure that you contact us. We're going to be holding some seminars very soon. A lot of people who got laid off, for example, not so long ago, they were also applying for startup visas. And I would encourage everybody to get my book from Amazon, because it really lays out what stage of your startup you are in and what visa might be suitable for you. But the program allows people to be here for 2.5 years initially, and then another 2.5 years. And it's enough time for people to actually transition into the permanent visas that we might have. So it's called International Entrepreneur Parole. My book has an entire chapter on it. I know. Thank you so much for sharing the book. I'll just hold it up too. And there's a whole chapter in the book, Founders and Startups. Who should read it? If you are in school, you should read it. Whether you are going to be a founder or not, you should read it. If you are already in corporate America and you have this dream to be a founder, you should read it. If you are outside the United States watching Alina's show, and if you're a fan of Alina from outside the country, you should get the book, because then you will feel the excitement that Alina is feeling. If you have been laid off recently, you should read this book. There are so many reasons. If you are an investor in startup companies, if you are an angel or venture funding company, you should read the book, because it's an ecosystem, and everybody has to get together to make it win-win for everybody. And ultimately, the American consumer, the American company, the American economy is the winner, and that makes us all winners with this program.
I love this. Okay, I have chills just hearing this, and I look forward to bringing you back on the show. This has been so educational, but I mean, I am so excited about this program and your book. I'm going out. I'm getting on to I love going to Barnes and Noble. So I'm going to be getting that as well. I want to thank you, Tahmina. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and then I will be joined by my next guest, Abigail Stahl, family law attorney extraordinary from New Jersey. So tune right back.